If you have ever wanted to start a podcast and grow it to having hundreds of thousands of downloads to being seen and heard around the world in over 45 countries, then welcome to the Crown Yourself podcast and our special 300th episode. I am your host, Kimberly Spencer, master mindset coach, certified high performance coach, and business strategist. And I am here to just say thank you so much for being a loyal listener. If this is your first time tuning into the Crown Yourself podcast, welcome to episode 300. We have come such a long way in this journey, and I just wanted to take this podcast episode to reflect on how far we have grown in just the past 6 years. So, and also, if you're new here, I also wanted to give you a little behind the scenes to how we've grown and what we've done and what's changed and what's evolved with this podcast, because it's been through a few evolutions and I've certainly grown up through it. I've birthed 2 other humans and moved 6 times since starting this podcast, 3 in which we're in the same country, and it's just been a wild ride. And it is from the bottom of my heart that I just want to thank you for your listenership, for tuning in, for sharing this with your friends. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode, because we are diving in today to the episode number 300. A little bit of story time. We started this podcast in 2019. And back then I launched it and the podcast was called The Princess and the Bee. And I've been asked by many podcasters why did you launch your podcast? What were you doing? And at the time I was in a podcast mastermind with my friends, Kevin and Alan and Summer Scalero. And we were all in a podcast mastermind and I was the only one without a podcast. And you've heard it said that, you are who you surround yourself with. And when I was in this podcast mastermind, realizing, oh my God, I'm the only one without a podcast, I was like, I got to do something about that. So in 2019, I launched my podcast. I called it The Princess and the Bee. My company has been called Crown Yourself. I have the trademark for that. And I didn't feel like naming my podcast Crown Yourself Podcast, which is what it is today. But I felt like I thought The Princess and the Bee because it was cheeky, it was metaphorical, it was about all the bees on becoming the queen of your life. And back then, quite frankly, I was still there was still some petty princess, nonsense that I had going on, quite frankly. Certain things with a victim mindset that I was still working through. I mean, I was 3 years into business. I'd replaced my husband's income. I'd become the breadwinner. And yet I was a new mom. And yet I was still processing some big, deep transitions and transformations. I mean, I started this podcast out of our 1-bedroom apartment in Koreatown near downtown Los Angeles. That's where I started. Since then, it has traveled with us to Australia. It's traveled with us back to California. It's traveled with us to Texas to move into literally our dream house. It's bananas how far we have evolved. So to give you a picture of what 2019 was like, 2019 was a very interesting year. As we launched this podcast, I launched it actually after having put all our stuff into storage and moved in with my parents, with my husband and my child, to support my mom in helping with the business and to get some extra support, quite frankly, with some babysitting. But also, that was the year that my dad was personally really struggling with mental health issues. And he ended up in the psych ward for suicidal ideation. And this podcast was such a lifeline for me, quite frankly. This podcast allowed me to process and think through and learn how to lead and be in a space where I actually had to lead because I had a growing community of followers, of listeners, being a part of this community. And I had to lead, even though all of that stuff that I didn't share that stuff back then. I kept a lot of the things in my relationship with my dad very private. It was well known and it's part of my story that he was an alcoholic, but some of the other things that I experienced growing up, I didn't share. I wasn't comfortable sharing them while he was alive. And I always told him that, even though he had given me full permission to share whatever. Even though I didn't need permission, I probably would have just done it anyway. But I wanted to be respectful because certain things and experiences that I had as a child, like sexual abuse, emotional and abuse, those experiences, they weren't all the time, but they happen enough to put you in a constant state of fear. And that was my experience growing up. Um, After my dad got sober, 2019 was the year he was sober. I would not have a relationship with my father when he was not sober. So after I staged his intervention, I said we were done until he achieved sobriety. But that once he achieved sobriety, he in 2018 was like our best year. That was like the year that I got to like really know my dad. Like I got to have my dad. And that was when I met Alan and Kevin and Summer and started being a part of this podcast mastermind. And I realized that, we were still pretty in debt, Spike and I, and we were trying to save up for a house. And in California, with between two entrepreneurs, I was like, there's no way we can continue paying our apartment, continue paying down the debt, build wealth also, and build generational wealth, and like start saving and buying assets and things like that, like stocks and whatnot, and save for a home. Like there was no financial way. And so I thought, well, what if we put all of the money that we are spending towards rent? We support my parents. They help with us a little bit as well, because my dad was in a place where I felt safe with him. He just was struggling with mental health after a family tragedy with his brother. But that experience allowed me to move into that next phase. And I remember asking my husband turned to me because he was not a fan of this plan. And he said, "How long are we going to be in California in this predicament?" And I said, "Probably a year." I said, "I'd give it a year." Well, fast forward to 2020, there we are. All our stuff is in storage. We're in Australia, and there's no reason for us to go back. My business is crushing it, and I can fully support my family if my husband's industry shuts down. And so we had the full means and ability to live and stay in Australia without worrying about things back home or rent or a mortgage or anything like that, because all our stuff was already in storage. So this podcast followed us through that. And then it grew exponentially during COVID. As you know, many podcasts were started during COVID, but podcasting, if you were in it and had already been in it, that's when we started to get award nominations. That's when we started to get our listenership in multiple countries. That's when we started to really expand and grow beyond just California and US based listeners and just friends and family listening. Fast forward like to 2021, I think it was 2021, maybe 2022. We started having like thousands of downloads per episode, thousands to up to like, I think our highest downloaded episode was 20,000 downloads. Exponential increases in downloads and listens. And I started playing with strategies to grow. But simultaneously, as we're living in Australia, living our dream life during COVID by the beach, my dad passed away. And and then and then in that same year, my grandma passed away, my aunt passed away, I had a baby. And 2021 and then I lost two family friends, and including my dad's best friend, both to drug overdoses. And that experience just tanked me with grief. And suddenly, if you've ever experienced like crushing grief of not just losing a caregiver, but losing a significant amount of people that you have been close to and known, it makes you question your own mortality. I met God in those moments. I was able to really look at like what my life is and purpose is. And I put the podcast on pause because I wasn't sure how to lead my company and be a mother and navigate grief, like crushing grief, and just do the life transitions of moving countries, starting a second business, all the things that happen within that span of time. Fast forward to 2022. We're back in California. We're packing up my dad's stuff. We're navigating multiple estates. And if you've ever navigated grief, death, and estate management, it's like having an additional business per dead person. The amount of paperwork, the amount of stuff that my mom was focusing on, I was helping with navigating being a mother and helping her get a buyout for the business that she had with my dad, and focusing on keeping my companies going, growing our sister business, Communication Queens, which really came out of podcast guesting and the power of that after generating $250,000 from just podcast guesting alone and just falling in love with the process and the medium of podcasting, specifically guesting. 2022, we then ended up moving, finding our dream house and moving to Texas and planting our roots. But it took me honestly, it took me a couple years to truly feel like rooted because of how uprooted. We moved 3 times in Australia. We'd moved multiple times. And I have had several conversations with our eldest son who experienced all those moves in his early formative years. And he's like, Mom, are we moving? Like he's still had to check in for about the first 2 years of us living in our home in Texas of, are we moving? Are we going to be leaving again? Is something going to be changing? That was hard for me to be able to steward that and the podcast and the leadership. So I let the podcast pause twice. Once in 2022 with the rebrand of being able to have just that awareness of like what are we doing here? Like what is the Princess and the Bee? And it was in that moment that I was like, no, it's no longer the Princess and the Bee. I had to become the queen whether I wanted to or not. And while my company has always been around really claiming your queendom, building your kingdom, there's still so many layers that we experience as leaders and that you will experience as you grow and alchemize transitions and grief and shifting, where you will meet that old devil again of a victim mindset, of being the villain, of, you know, prioritizing performance over pleasure, prioritizing performance over actually presence and being real and being honest about who you are. There are many times that you're going to meet that similar devil. It's just going to be dressed up in a different dress. And I did with this podcast. And that was when I had the shift of like, oh, this podcast needs to be called Crown Yourself. Like that's our business. That's like, it has to be tied in exactly with that. What is this metaphorical Princess and the Bee? So side note from a business standpoint, like, don't call your podcast something like metaphorical and floofy because it does mess with your SEO. When we did that, when we made the transition, that was when we actually started to have the massive downloads because it was in alignment with our brand, our SEO, and now our AI. So the podcast can be such a great authority building asset. And that's what it has been for all of these years as I have led through grief, moving, family transformations, birth, death, like business challenges of like cash flow crises that I've been very open about that happened in 2024. So fast forward to 2024, that was the second time we paused the podcast, was we were growing our sister business, focused on building that, focused on serving our clients. I was focused on writing my now bestseller book, Make Every Podcast Want You. And in that shift of focus, I knew that we had to leverage our podcast to be able to promote the book. And I did. But after the book came out, after the great like emergence, I had to take a pause because I looked at our business and it was in a cash flow crisis. And I looked at our numbers and I was like, oh my God, we may be making revenue, but we ain't making any profit. Like we're negative in profit and cash flow. I was pulling out from personal funds to be able to fund my team and pay my team. Like I wasn't making anything from my businesses. And this model does not make sense. It doesn't fill me up. It doesn't light my fire. I'm not loving it. I'm not loving being a full end-to-end guesting agency. There were many problems that we had with deliverables and how we were doing it. And I said, I don't want to do this. Like, this isn't the model for me. And so we paused the model, pivoted it into a full done with you consulting model, where basically now we come on with Communication Queens as your consulting partner in building your brand visibility in your ecosystem and being able to support you in getting booked on podcasts. Yes, but we're not doing the end to end. We're not in your schedule. That's on you. And that was because I had to look at my deeply core centered values. The number one core value of Crown Yourself has always been ownership. And part of ownership is being proactive. And one of the problems that we were facing with our agency was in the podcast guesting world and in podcasting in general is responsiveness. Is like I had to put into our contracts that our clients had to respond within 3 days or else podcasts get booked. For the Crown Yourself podcast, we're booked months out in advance. And we're a top 2% podcast going for a top 1% podcast this year. Like my vision for this podcast is that it grows into being one of the top 100 podcasts. And I can't do that without your help. I can't do that just by myself. And that's why there are so many myths that I've busted throughout being a podcaster. One is just the power of consistency and being able to stick to it. Like when I found out when writing my book and studying all the statistics around podcasting, 90% of podcasters quit. They quit after 10 episodes, just 10 episodes. And I was like, now we're on episode 300. Like, how badass is that, first and foremost? Secondly, I'm also not about doing a podcast and letting it just spin its wheels when it's not producing anything for your business. If you're not generating community, if you're not building trust with your following, if you're not generating leads, conversions, and building true fanship and value and collaboration with your listeners, what are you doing? Like, what are you even doing? You're just shouting into the wind. And we had to look at the podcast as how can we serve with our guests, serve with the people that we have coming on, really honor where we are, what we want to do. We've played with doing sponsorships. We played with having other people's sponsorships. We played with having our affiliate partnerships be sponsors for the podcast. We have tried it all with this podcast. And now on episode 300, we're still figuring it out because here's the thing is with podcasting, as with any marketing in the digital age, whatever you're doing, it works for about a year and a half. And then you have to pivot in some way, shape, or form into doing it better, higher quality, or deeper in connection and community. And those things will always be like quality, quantity of episodes, and quantity of production. That always quantity of content. Like if you look at the top content producers like the Hormozis out there, they're pumping out like 400 pieces of content a week. It's crazy. Like you have like the amount of content that you are producing, but you don't want to just be you don't want to just be a broke content creator. You want to have that content lead somewhere that actually is converting into your products and your services. And so when I looked at launching this at this podcast, I always saw it as a vehicle for demonstrating coaching ability, for meeting and building relationships with mentors who have now become friends, with building collaborative partnerships, with being able to build and steward a movement around ownership and radical responsibility and showing up fully expressed and authentic in who you are and what values and services you have to serve this world and how to be a steward of the mission that you have in your heart. That's been the mission all along with this podcast. And I've just had to deepen that within myself multiple times, facing that devil that will make you question. It'll make you doubt yourself. It'll make you wonder, why the hell are you doing this after 300 episodes? Like, isn't that enough? Like, when are you going to stop? Like, there are always those voices of the ego that pop in from time to time to keep you in your space and small. And I have the beauty of having consistency through a podcast and doing it from 0 to like hundreds of thousands of downloads and 300 episodes and being seen in 45 and listened to in 45 countries. There is power in being able to recognize how you are showing up with your visibility, how you are leading that mission, and how that mission just gets deepened within you. This podcast has been such a gift over 300 episodes to be able to see the evolution, not just of my business, but also of myself as a leader. And I would challenge anyone because one of the things in starting any business, it's so easy to get enticed and hypnotized by the quick wins, by the viral, you know, money blurbs on YouTube and Instagram of like, I made $11 million through my course in 5 seconds. And you don't realize that $11 million has been made over the course of a decade. So being able to have longevity and have longevity actually be the goal, that's where you meet yourself in the uncomfortable moments. That's where you're going to meet yourself, is not making quick, flashy cash viral hits the win. When you're focused on that, you're focused on short-term ego proving energy gains rather than sustainability for the long term. How can you build something that allows you to develop as a leader? And for me, podcasting is that. For me, the goal of writing and releasing one book every year for the next 13 years is an incredible goal, but it is a goal that is to stretch my own leadership and capacity. It is not a goal to prove myself to the rest of the world or try to show everyone how amazing I am or how much money I can make, because all of those are egoic based goals. I'm looking at what brings me joy and what has allowed me to lead. And this podcast has been such a beautiful vessel. I didn't think I'd get emotional for this. It's been such a beautiful vessel to witness me almost as in watching the movie of my own life and seeing it play out and seeing the growth and seeing who I've become and how proud I am of who I have become. And you only get that when you stick with something when it's not performing. Like, we went from having 20,000 downloads per episode into 400 because I chose to take a break. 400 downloads. Sometimes less. Like, there is growth and there's humility that comes with that. And there is such power that comes when you are able to lead and integrate, not just with like the success wins, but integrate them with like those humbling moments that brought you to your knees. Those moments that allowed you to question your purpose, that allowed you to deepen your relationship with God's source, the creator, that allowed you to breathe into being present with what is and decide again, yes, this is worth it. Yes, this is for me. Yes, I'm still continuing on. Yes, I'm committing to this. Yes, I'm continuing on with this. It's like any relationship. Like, they say marriage is hard. Marriage isn't hard. It's like when you're with the right person, it's not this like everyday slog, but there are those times where yes, you do wake up and you're like, I still choose this. I still choose this. I still choose to do my life with this person. I still choose to bring my full self to this. I am still choosing into this. And that's what this podcast has been for me. It's been an exploration of the power of choice for me to choose into allowing my voice to expand, mature, grow, develop, and lead through very challenging times and see how far I've come in the process. Like, just from a evolutionary standpoint for myself, I'm grateful for this. For you listening and being a part of that journey, I feel like we're on a wonderful ride and it's not stopping. Like, we are going to be leading into some very interesting times in the next couple years. And I am so honored that this podcast gets to be a vessel to support you in your growth and your development. I am so honored to have served you, to have been witnessed as well throughout this process of my own development, of my own growth. Like, there's such power in when you allow yourself to be witnessed in your own development, in trying something and braving into the unknown and having guests who are like, I don't know if this guest is going to resonate with my audience, but you still do it anyway. And you try and then you fail and you make mistakes and you grow and you put things on pause and then you recommit to them. And then you realize that you always wanted to do this in the first place. And I just want to thank you for being a part of this journey. Thank you for 300 episodes. And I'm so grateful for being on this journey with you. Cheers to the next 300. As always, my fellow sovereigns, own your throne, mind your business, because your reign is now. I'll see you in the next 300 episodes.